Nancy Pelosi spent decades building power behind closed doors until Elon Musk pulled the curtain back in front of the entire country. It started with a leak not from a whistleblower, not from some anonymous deep state exile. This came straight from Elon Musk at 3 a.m. Eastern. Without warning or explanation, Musk posted a cryptic phrase on his X account. Operation Doge is live. No context, no links. Just those 5 words, and then he vanished from the platform within minutes. The internet exploded. Reddit threads lit up, Telegram channels theorized everything from alien technology to mass arrests. But then exactly 12 hours later, Musk reappeared, this time, not online, but on a stage in front of what looked like an abandoned mission control room from the Apollo era, except the screens weren't showing rocket trajectories. They were showing financial charts line, graphs, maps, and something else faces. Musk stood at the center of it all, arms behind his back, flanked by analysts and plainclothes agents. His expression was unreadable, but when he spoke, the room went still. "I've stayed silent long enough," he said. "This is not about politics. This is about betrayal." The live stream was only 8 minutes long, but it was enough to ignite a firestorm. Musk revealed the existence of a covert federal partnership, codenamed Doge, tasked with investigating what he called the systematic laundering of taxpayer money under the guise of foreign aid and humanitarian initiatives. He didn't mention names right away, but the tone made it clear this wasn't a theory. This was an accusation. The backdrop was real. The location, an unused Launch Coordination Center near Cocoa Beach, Florida, just miles from the Kennedy Space Center, after NASA downsized the facility, was bought privately and left dormant until Musk quietly restructured it as the headquarters for a financial intelligence task force. He'd been preparing for years. The accusations came next on his screen. Documents appeared, emails, ledger entries, signatures. The names started flashing: a senator from Oregon, a former transportation secretary, a half-dozen aides connected to nonprofits operating in Ethiopia, in Myanmar. Then came the moment no one expected. Nancy Pelosi's face filled the central screen. Musk's voice didn't change. "Representative Pelosi has been linked to over $327 million in foreign transfers between 2014 and 2021, none of which are disclosed in public records. These funds pass through intermediaries registered as NGOs, religious charities, and disaster relief organizations. Many of them trace back to accounts held in Luxembourg, the Seychelles, and Cyprus." He paused. "Some of those accounts are in her niece's name." People watching across the country couldn't believe it. The same policy who championed climate funding, bills foreign aid reform, and ethics in government was now being portrayed as a fraud, a mastermind of financial manipulation beneath layers of public service. But the documents kept coming. Forensic records showed real estate purchases in Utah and coastal Maine, homes bought under shell companies and immediately renovated, flipped, or rented to government contractors. Must claim they trace back to a larger network of hidden assets, a spider web that implicated not just Pelosi, but several of her longtime colleagues. News anchors looked stunned. Some networks cut the feed entirely. Others doubled down, airing expert panels that attempted to discredit the documents before anyone could fully examine them. Yet millions had already seen enough within an hour. Pelosi offshore was trending across social media. People began demanding transparency. Grassroots groups launched FOIA requests. Even those who disliked Musk weren't sure what to make of it, because no one else, not even seasoned journalists, had presented anything this detailed or audacious. A young woman in Albuquerque, watching the stream from her phone at work, told a friend later, "It's like someone kicked the door open, and instead of gaslighting us about what's behind it, he just let us see everything." Musk made no further statements that day. He walked off camera, never looking back, as federal agents took over the room behind him. The live stream ended. No outro, no Q&A, just silence. But the documents leaked that night changed everything. The walls were off, white, cracked in some corners from decades of Florida humidity. The place didn't look like the nerve center of a federal operation. It looked like it had been frozen in time. But if you stepped inside, past the rusted metal doors and the old launch countdown clocks that still hung for show, you'd see something else entirely. Tables covered in monitors, cables snaking across the floor, an entire room rewired with 21st century tech patched together from private aerospace contracts and federal surveillance resources. The air smelled faintly of coffee sweat and burnt circuit boards. This was the heart of Operation Doge, and Elon Musk ran it like a silent conductor to most of the team. He wasn't Elon, he was lead, not out of ego. But clarity when someone shouted "let in," it meant Musk was entering the room when someone called lead. Clear, it meant he was stepping away. He didn't give speeches. He didn't pep talk. He asked questions and expected real answers. Across the main room stood a massive curved LED wall, 60 feet across. On it, dozens of live feeds, updated in real-time bank activity, logs flagged nonprofit transactions, encrypted file scans, facial recognition pings from surveillance data. At the front of the room stood one woman, Riley Sonnet, mid-40s, former military intelligence. She left government work after a scandal that she never commented on, and no one asked about Musk recruited her 3 years prior. And now she ran point on forensic data. Riley via Musk said, with Wardy turning his head, "Walk me through the Pelosi branch again." She tapped a touchscreen and zoomed in. The shell account Bloombridge Relief Fund claims to operate orphanage services in Malawi on paper. It's funded by two Nyong'os out of San Francisco, but follow the transfer path she swiped once the screen lit up with 3 lines branching toward a nondescript company in Luxembourg, Furnico Asset Holdings. Riley continued registered by someone named Emery Ellison, which just so happens to be Pelosi's niece's married name. They changed it after 2017, probably to duck attention. Same woman, same birthday. We confirmed it through voter registrations and 2 prior credit card bills. See here, she flicked to a side panel. 2 statements popped up, one from a restaurant in Monterey, another from a private jet booking in Stockholm. Musk squinted at the screen jet company paid from Furnico Yep, the exact same week that $4.3 million came through their Cyprus branch. He didn't smile. He just whispered good, then walked toward the war room table. That table, unlike everything else in the center, was new carbon fiber. With a matte finish around it sat 3 people, a former DOJ investigator, a cybersecurity expert who once hacked a Chinese telecom network, and Sasha, Brand Musk's legal strategist. Sasha leaned forward, arms crossed. This is going to blow back. They're not just going to sit quietly and let this happen. They'll attack you personally. Added the WJ guy, they'll say, "You're derailing democracy." They'll say, "You're obsessed." Musk nodded, "Let them." He tapped the edge of the table twice. "I'm not interested in spin. I'm interested in consequences. These people built careers on hiding behind the fog of humanitarian language. I want the fog gone." He glanced up at the ceiling where a small drone hovered silently, recording everything he knew one day. "All of this might need to be released," Riley interrupted. "There's more." She turned the screen again. Maxine Waters' niece co-signed 2 of the grants tied to Pelosi's fund. There's a transfer from a Relief for Yemen project that loops through 6 layers and lands in a Beverly Hills property. Trustee Sasha ran a hand through her hair. "That's bold, even for DC. No, Musk said that's desperation when they stop fearing exposure. They get lazy." There was silence in the room, just the occasional beep from the monitors and the steady drone of cooling fans. Then Riley whispered almost to herself, "We're not just pulling one thread, we're tearing the whole quilt." Musk didn't say anything, but his fingers tapped again 3 times this time. Then he stood, line up the warrants. He said, "I want a coordinated hit. Phoenix, San Francisco, DC, and Malibu. And I want them simultaneous. You're not going to give a heads up to Congress?" Sasha asked. "I just did." He replied. He walked away, heading toward a dim corridor leading to a secure conference room. No guards followed. No aides trailed behind, just his silhouette disappearing quietly under the emergency lighting. But even Musk knew that paperwork wasn't enough. Action had to come next. The morning felt like any other until it wasn't in Washington, D.C. Office workers were just pouring into government buildings when the black SUV started pulling up. No sirens, no dramatic entrance, just silent, fast-moving agents stepping out with purpose. Federal marshals, DOJ liaisons, and a few faces who didn't wear any badges at all. They moved with tight precision, like they'd rehearsed this a dozen times over. In Phoenix, a quiet address in a gated community was breached with a flash warrant. Neighbors looked out their windows and saw 2 agents rolling out cases full of scanning gear. One pointed toward the garage. 2 luxury cars with license plates tied to a clean energy nonprofit that hadn't filed a real grant in 4 years. And on the cliffs above Malibu, a modest-looking home with heavy security gates had its locks disengaged by a federal override. That property, purchased in 2019, by a shell corporation connected to a climate initiative, supposedly headquartered in Sudan. Inside each location, agents followed a clear list: laptops, encrypted drives, financial ledgers, secondary phones, hidden safes. They knew exactly what they were looking for. They weren't digging. They were confirming at the Capitol in D.C. The tension finally snapped when two agents walked into a lawmaker's office without knocking. Nancy Pelosi was already on edge. She had been briefed by her aides about that stunt Musk pulled, but she hadn't yet seen the documents herself. She was mid-interview with a CNN anchor when one of her assistants leaned in and whispered something that made her freeze. The live interview cut out. Pelosi stood, pulled off her mic, and marched out of the room. "Why wasn't I told?" she hissed as she passed, huddled her staff. "I want names. I want to know who authorized this." Now the agents weren't rude. They were firm. One showed a sealed warrant already signed off by a judge in Colorado. Not D.C., too many conflicts of interest, the courts knew better. "We're here to collect materials relevant to financial transfers made through congressional grant programs between 2015 and 2022. One of them said her office was still aide after aides stood frozen, unsure what to do or say. One of them picked up a phone but was told immediately any attempt to remove or destroy digital records may result in obstruction charges. Pelosi narrowed her eyes. "This is a mistake, a coordinated smear. He's playing you." But the agents weren't listening. They had a job to do. Across town, cameras began to swarm the Capitol steps. Reporters were everywhere. Some angry, others ecstatic. One asked, "Is it true?" "Nancy Pelosi is under federal investigation," another shouted. "Are there indictments coming today?" No answers inside Musk's operations center. Riley watched the live feeds from a corner screen. Green lights turned yellow as agents confirmed seizures. Phoenix was marked as complete. Malibu had located two vaults built into the foundation of the house. In D.C., one laptop had been encrypted so tightly it required an emergency transfer to Quantico. Musk stood silently at the table, arms crossed. Sasha stepped up beside him, holding her phone. "They've already started spinning it," she said. "MSNBC just went live with a panel claiming this is a tech authoritarian power grab." Musk didn't even blink. "What did I say would happen?" "They'd come for your character," she replied. "They're scared." He said they should be. Meanwhile, back at the Capitol, Pelosi was pacing her private quarters. Her phone vibrated. It was a call from someone she hadn't spoken to in years. She ignored it, then it buzzed again, a text this time from a longtime lobbyist. "They have the grants, the Yemen files too. You need to shut this down." Her fingers tightened around the phone. "This isn't just political," she muttered. "This is war. But even in war, timing is everything." And right now, Musk had all the momentum, but Pelosi wasn't going down without a fight, and neither were her allies. It took less than 6 hours for the headlines to change. What began as questions, "Did Elon Musk just expose congressional fraud?" quickly morphed into something else entirely. "Tech billionaire targets Democratic icon. Elon Musk weaponizes federal power." The coverage wasn't uniform, but the strategy was. Every news outlet with even a whisper of influence began picking a side. CNN opened with a segment showing Musk's old tweets claiming he'd always had a grudge against the political elite. MSNBC questioned whether his federal partnership with Operation Doge had ever been constitutional. And within hours, a group of House members released a joint statement calling Musk a threat to democratic norms and institutional balance. But he didn't respond, not on X, not to the press, not even to the handful of allies texting him behind the scenes. Instead, a single message appeared across the official Operation Doge site. White text on "Black facts don't care. Who's nervous inside homes across the country." The divide began to crack wide open in a small town outside Tucson. A high school teacher named Denise Farrow paused her lesson to ask her students what they thought of the Musk situation. Half the class shrugged. One boy said his dad thought it was about time someone did something. Another girl said her mom cried, watching Pelosi get grilled on live TV in Tampa. A retired firefighter watched the congressional hearing replay in silence. When his son asked him what he thought, the man didn't answer. He just pointed at the screen. When Musk held up a government grant form with 3 signatures blacked out, that he said is how they hide it in a Chicago suburb. 2 brothers got into a screaming match over dinner. One said Musk was a patriot. The other said he was a narcissist with a god complex. Their mother, tired and quiet, just cleared the table without saying a word. And that was exactly what Musk anticipated inside the command center. Sasha stood in the press response bay, watching live streams of cable panels. "They're making you the story," she muttered. "Let them." Musk replied without looking away from the scrolling data. "That's the only car they've got left." Riley turned from her station. "We're getting new pings. 3 more. Shell Corp confirmed, and Maxine Waters' niece just updated her online bio, took down every reference to Furnico Holdings. Musk gave a thin, almost amused smile. Guilty people always clean house in a panic. But the real bombshell came later that evening when a leak hit a major podcast, not a news anchor, not a cable segment, just a guy named Mitch Lowe, a war veteran and independent journalist who'd made a name for himself, calling out corporate corruption. He'd somehow gotten a copy of one of the private transcripts, an audio file from a meeting between Pelosi and her legal team, recorded on accident by a Bluetooth device. The line was crackly, but the voice was unmistakably hers. "They've got enough to bury me if this goes to trial. You don't need to tell me that I know that clip went viral in less than 3 hours. Cable news avoided it, but TikTok didn't. YouTube didn't. Independent blogs didn't. Suddenly people weren't talking about whether Musk was dangerous. They were asking why no one else had ever shown this level of proof." Pelosi responded the next morning in a televised statement outside her Georgetown home. Her tone was firm, but her eyes betrayed a deep fatigue. "This is nothing more than a smear campaign orchestrated by a billionaire who believes his money puts him above the law. I have nothing to hide," but by then the narrative had already shifted. In a coffee shop in Lincoln, Nebraska, a young woman leaned toward her boyfriend and said, "If she had nothing to hide, why is she so stiff back in the war room?" Musk reviewed the footage with Sasha. "She's deflecting." She said, "Classic, doesn't deny anything. Just attacks your credibility." Musk said nothing for a moment, then set the hearing date. "I'm ready." But while the country fought each other, Musk prepared to face her in person. The hearing room was quieter than usual, not because there were fewer people. On the contrary, the place was packed. Cameras were mounted on every available surface. Reporters lined the back wall like vulture. Staffers whispered nervously, glancing down at their phones between each breath. This wasn't routine. This wasn't oversight. This was something else. Elon Musk walked in with no entourage, no lawyers, no press handler, just himself in a gray suit that looked too plain for someone with his net worth. He sat down at the center of the witness table, adjusted the microphone, and waited. Across from him sat members of the Congressional Oversight Committee, some openly hostile, others clearly uncomfortable. Nancy Pelosi entered, last flanked by 2 aides, and took her seat at the panel. Her posture was straddled, her expression calm but icy. A murmur ran through the room as Chairman Felix Ramon, a representative from New Mexico, cleared his throat and began. "This committee convenes today to understand the scope, legality, and ethical implications of Operation Doge, and to allow the American people to hear the evidence firsthand." He looked toward Musk. "You may proceed." Musk leaned forward, fingers interlocked. The objective of Operation Doge was simple: follow the money where taxpayer funds were distributed under humanitarian pretenses. "We traced them through every layer they passed, from the Department of State to private contractors to charitable entities that were anything but charitable." He paused. "I want to be clear, this isn't about party affiliation. It's about the erosion of trust between the people and the institutions they fund." He tapped a button on the small screen in front of him. The room dimmed slightly as the main display behind him lit up. The first slide: a wire transfer from the U.S. Foreign Assistance Office to a nonprofit in Armenia. The second, a matching withdrawal 2 days later to a real estate firm registered in the Netherlands. The third, ownership records tying that firm to a management company in Belize. One linked to a relative of Pelosi. Musk looked up. "Would anyone here like to dispute the ownership trail? Because I have notarized copies of each step." No one said a word. Chairman Ramon leaned forward. "You're saying this money was routed back into private property portfolios?" "Yes," Muskie replied, "and not just one, multiple. We tracked 32 properties across 6 countries. Some are rentals, some were flipped. All were purchased using funds that originated in U.S. aid programs." Pelosi finally spoke with all due respect. "Mr. Muskie, you're not a federal investigator. You're not accountable to anyone. You're a billionaire with a God complex who's hijacked a federal partnership for a personal vendetta." Musk turned slowly toward her. "If it's personal, Congresswoman, why is your niece listed as a financial advisor on 3 of the shell companies we found laundering those funds?" She opened her mouth but didn't answer. Musk clicked again. Next slide, a 2020 email chain subject line, urgent transfer before audit recipients, 2 senior NGO directors, and an assistant from Pelosi's office. The assistant's reply read, confirm delay the filing. They won't flag it if it falls under development assistance. The screen behind Musk froze on that final line. You could feel the air change in the room. Then came the question that pulled the floor out. He looked directly at Pelosi. How does a public servant who earns less than $200,000 a year come to hold indirect ownership in over $100 million in global real estate assets? No reply. Camera zoomed in. Reporters scribbled. The silence was louder than anything spoken that morning. Chairman Ramon cleared his throat again. Clearly uncomfortable. Congresswoman, would you like to respond? Pelosi shifted. Her voice was quieter now. There are many explanations for wealth accumulation. Book deals, investments, family trusts. I've been in service for decades. Musk didn't flinch. I have no issue with people earning wealth. He said I have a problem when they disguise theft as service. A ripple of quiet gas moved through the room. Sasha watched from the back of the chamber. She could tell this wasn't just about Pelosi anymore. This was bigger. People were starting to wonder how deep the rot went. Musk closed his file. I don't want applause. I don't want vengeance. I want accountability for the American people, for the single parent working double shifts, for the veteran who can't get a proper medical appointment, for every taxpayer who trusted you. He stood. The room was still, but even with the evidence laid bare, something unexpected happened 3 days later. Nancy Pelosi announced she would not seek re-election. She stood at a podium outside her San Francisco home, her voice soft, her words carefully chosen. I've always believed in public service. I've always believed in the power of good governance. But there comes a time when new voices must rise. She didn't mention the investigation. She didn't mention Operation Doge. But everyone knew the statement came just hours after a sealed federal inquiry was quietly confirmed by the Office of the Inspector General. No charges had been filed yet, but the pressure was unmistakable. Whispers of internal audits, frozen assets, and quiet resignations began swirling through Capitol Hill. Inside the halls of Congress, something had shifted. Staffers moved a little faster. Senators suddenly started asking for legal briefings. One prominent representative from Maryland quietly scrubbed his online financial disclosures. A senator from Nevada canceled a family trip to Dubai and hired a new forensic accountant. No one said it out loud, but they all felt it. The rules had changed in the weeks following the hearing. 3 nonprofit CEOs tied to flagged NGOs resigned. One disappeared entirely. A 4th, based in Oregon, was found to have transferred in ownership of his entire foundation to a previously unknown philanthropic council based in Qatar. And yet Musk said almost nothing. He returned to the Doge headquarters in Florida and resumed daily operations occasionally. He would issue a single-sentence update via the command center's portal. Things like data integrity confirmed in Arizona raids. Public records requests are 83% processed fraud. Accountability is not a phase. He didn't celebrate. He didn't hold press conferences. He just kept working, but the country didn't forget. In a diner outside Bismarck, North Dakota, an elderly couple watched a news clip from the hearing. While finishing breakfast, the woman turned to her husband and said, I never thought I'd see the day someone would actually hold them to account in Fresno, California. A group of college students rewound the clip where Musk asked, how does a public servant become a millionaire off taxpayer money? They played it again and again, mouthing the words like a mantra. And in a veterans hall in Tulsa, a retired Marine stood up during open mic night and said it wasn't about being red or blue. It was about someone finally pulling the curtain back inside Pelosi's inner circle. The damage control was relentless. Lawyers were brought in. PR firms worked overtime. But the narrative wasn't cooperating. The leaked documents, the audio clip, the public hearing. None of it could be undone. Her defenders argued the evidence was incomplete. Her critics argued it was only the beginning. And then something strange happened. Musk received a letter not from the press, not from a fan, but from a former congressional ethics officer. The man, now retired and in his 70s, had watched the hearing from a cabin in northern Idaho. His letter read simply, I once tried to raise the same red flags. They buried me in paperwork and silence. Thank you for not letting them do it to you. Musk didn't respond, but the letter was framed and placed in a quiet corner of the command center, just above the power grid display. Sasha, sitting beside Riley one evening, asked a question neither had voiced before. Do you think this actually changes anything? Riley didn't answer right away. She watched as Musk passed silently behind them, deep in thought. Then she said, "It already has across the nation." FOII requests surged. New watchdog groups began forming. Online volunteers offered to comb through public spending data in their own states, and every now and then someone would post a screenshot of a Musk quote that had started circulating as graffiti in subway stations, as bumper stickers, as stencils on sidewalks. Truth isn't loud, it's steady. Musk never claimed victory. He didn't need to. But Musk's final words left something much bigger behind. The final video came without warning, no promo, no tweet, no headline tease. It appeared one morning on the official Doge portal, titled "Only a Word to the Public." The footage wasn't polished, no dramatic lighting, no cinematic score, just Elon Musk sitting alone in the same mission control room where it all started. The LED wall behind him was off, the room was dim but not staged. You could hear the faint click of a cooling fan in the background. He looked directly into the camera. "I want to explain something," he began. "Not to politicians, not to the media. To you there was a pause, a real one, not for effect, just a breath, a reset." Then he leaned in. "I didn't start this to destroy anyone. I started it because I saw something, patterns, movement, things most people overlook. And when I looked deeper, I realized the people trusted with our money, our programs, and our future were playing by a different set of rules." He shook his head slightly. "Public service isn't supposed to be a retirement pay plan. It's not supposed to be a shortcut to luxury, but too many in office made it exactly that and counted on no one watching closely enough to call them out." He raised a small folder in his hand, tapped it twice against the desk. This is just one sliver of what we found. Not just Pelosi, not just one party. It goes wider, deeper, and yes, some of it is still being verified, but the point isn't the drama. The point is the silence that made it all possible." He sat back. "They didn't just exploit systems. They exploited your distraction, your trust, your tiredness. They gambled that you were too exhausted to notice and too discouraged to care for." A few seconds, Musk said nothing. His hands were still, his eyes didn't move from the lens, but maybe he continued. "It's time to stop treating corruption like a background hum, like a cost of doing business. Maybe it's time to stop laughing off the hypocrisy and start asking better questions, because when people in power know you're not watching, that's when they become dangerous." He stood up, then slowly, and walked toward a panel near the wall. The camera stayed locked on him as he pressed a button, bringing up a large screen. It displayed a collage of real Americans, some in kitchens, some at work, some on buses, all watching the congressional hearing from earlier that month. Musk turned to the screen. "You don't have to agree with me. You don't have to like me, but you should demand better from the people who spend your money in your name. That's not politics, that's respect." Then he turned back to the camera one last time. "I'm going back to my work. You should keep watching theirs." The video ended there. No outro, no call for donations, no branded tag. But what came next didn't need planning. Within hours, forms and message boards filled with people sharing their own questions, screenshots of local spending, reports, flags on questionable nonprofit activity, city contracts that didn't make sense. A hashtag started to trend across multiple platforms. #not above us, and in classrooms, dinner tables, laundromats, break rooms. People were talking, not yelling, not lecturing, talking. In Salem, Oregon, a bus driver pulled over on his lunch break and watched the full video on his phone. When it ended, he sat for a moment, then whispered to himself, "He's right. I stopped paying attention in Ohio." A single mom paused during her shift as a night janitor to jot down a question she wanted to email her state rep the next morning, and in a town outside Wichita, an Army veteran started printing copies of Musk's quote and taping them to street poles. When silence profits. The few, truth becomes a duty. Maybe it wouldn't last. Maybe the system would fight back harder, but something had cracked open, and this time people weren't turning away. They'd seen the rot, they'd felt the betrayal, but most importantly, they'd witnessed someone stand up, not for power, but for accountability. That doesn't make Elon Musk a savior. It makes him a reminder. Subscribe if you believe accountability still matters.